Hi everyone, real quick message. So what we're being asked to do right now is pay attention to the scales. If you are finding yourself in a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, a lot of low, dense energies, the reason you're kind of hanging out there is because if you imagine how a scale works the old-fashioned way, it's being heavily weighed down by life, by choices, by environments, by people, by experiences, by variables. And we are being held in that position because they can be very heavy, which means that our spiritual self, our lighter self, our childlike self is kind of floating off in the air and having a hard time combating this very dense experience, this very deep, anxious depression kind of experience. And what we're being asked to do is not just find things in the heavy portion of the scale to pluck off. I know what that sounded like. It's also, how can we add to the other side of the scale? What can we do in our own free will to add to the other side? Our spiritual side, our lighter side, our childlike side. So think about, how can you balance the scales, not just in removing things, because I know sometimes there's just certain things you can't remove or certain circumstances you cannot change, and that's perfectly okay. You don't necessarily have to, as long as you find something to place on the other side of the scale so that it can come back into balance. And give it a little bit of time, because sometimes what happens is we add in something to the other side. Let's say we're being held down by anxious attachments or anxiety or depression or a certain circumstance we can't get out of, and we're weighed down and we can't change those in this current position you're in. Once you start adding some spirituality, some meditation, some lighter childlike activities to kind of lighten the mood, you have to give it time, because if you've paid attention to a scale before, it takes a little bit. It'll bounce back and forth a little bit. So you need to give it a little bit of time to come back into balance. And the trick to keeping yourself from getting in that position again, where just one is heavily weighed down and one is way up high, because we can't, there's such a thing as having too much spirituality and not being grounded in the real world and into our human practices. So it's about keeping it in balance. And the trick is that when you start to see it tip one direction or another, either, too much high in the sky or too much getting involved in the lower level energies, is as you see it start to tip in one direction or another, you're either needing to remove or add to the other side. So if you're finding yourself like, it's too much spirituality, it's too much meditation, it's too much just like delusional thinking, ground yourself, take yourself back out in nature, do something that's a little bit more, stable in this human experience to kind of rebalance it. And that's really the trick. That's how we're trying to find ourselves, is this balancing scale. And that's what we're all being asked to do right now. So I hope this makes sense. I hope this is helpful, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.